Well, welcome to this video, and I hope you like it. If you do, click the like button, hit subscribe, and share with a friend. Okay, it's been a little while. Got some more footage I need to put up and edit and everything. I've been busy with other things. We got a little bit of a warm spell here. Been trying to do stuff outside and got a bunch of fires to put out at work, so I've been a little bit relaxed on doing that. I want to talk a little bit today about another one of our more societal issues here. And back when I was in the Navy, there was this one guy that always used to ironically sort of ask, you know, who's more evil, Disney or Hitler? And in reality, in a sort of weird way, maybe Disney, or maybe what Disney represents. And more in the sense that at least when you know something's evil and it confronts you as being evil, you kind of know how to resist. And when evil or misinformation is somehow sugar-coated, it's a little bit more dangerous, a little bit more insidious, a little bit more hard to combat. It's more like a drug. And you know, we live in a reality show world, and we kind of look back at the past as being a golden age. Things have gotten worse in a way, but then again, as the hippie generation sort of pointed out about the 50s and, you know, the Cold War and McCarthyism and this sort of false front of these capitalist American values, you know, there's a rotten core underneath that's kind of hidden. And you know, we look today at some of the over-the-top stuff and we think that once upon a time our foundations, the things we believed in, were somehow better and more innocent, but they weren't. And you know, Disney deserves criticism on a number of fronts. They take existing folk tales and they claim them and copyright them as their own, and twist the stories and cash in on them. Most of your Disney fairy tales are nothing like the original stories, although you can say that even back in the Victorian era, people like the Grimm brothers collected these folk tales and kind of whitewashed them into a Victorian morality play version of the original story. But to Disney, you know, even historical characters are not sacred. How many people in this country are growing up as kids thinking of Pocahontas as a Disney princess? She was a real person who really lived. How many people think of Anastasia as a Disney princess and Rasputin as a, you know, this evil wizard or whatever? Those are actually real people who actually lived in the 20th century. Thinking, I know there's at least one or two more where they've taken historical figures and made fairy tale people out of them. And, it's just, it's crazy. But then Walt Disney also started the whole sort of TV documentary series. Disney had a lot of wildlife shows. They had one I'm drawing a blank on about the desert that's highly criticized. But their most criticized one is White Wilderness, which was filmed in Canada. And it like most of the things, the scenes were faked. Animals were often killed in situations they would not normally find themselves in, or in fights with animals they normally wouldn't be inclined to interact with at all. And the most famous thing from White Wilderness is the lemming scene. And sometimes it's falsely stated that Disney created the myth, although it's not really clear where the myth came from, but apparently there was a myth even prior to Disney that lemmings would migrate and they would follow each other off a cliff or across a river or whatever. Most lemmings are just a certain type of wild field mouse, basically. And they don't, most of them don't migrate in any way, shape, or form, and they don't blindly follow each other off of cliffs. That thing is false, but they made a set and they pushed them off of a cliff into the Bow River, I believe it is, in Calgary. So, it was all done on a soundstage. They've also got a scene in there with a polar bear but a polar bear cub climbing this icy slope and then slipping and falling and rolling over all these rocks and stuff, which also apparently was staged. And it kind of makes sense because polar bears tend to be near the ocean. They're around ice and icebergs and things like that. They're normally not climbing mountains. I'm not saying it never happens, but most of the places where they're at, not steep icy cliffs. But it's gone on from there, and it's gotten worse. But all the things I remember when I was a kid, they had this Wonderful World of Disney, and it would have cartoons, and it'd have these little so-called educational programs, and they were fake. And there was a big thing, before we had Animal Planet and that, we had, once a week there was Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, also fake. In fact, looked through some stuff, and it seems like some of the scenes that were supposedly in the Amazon or Africa or something were actually shot in Florida. So just shows exactly how accurate these things were. There's a pretty good documentary that was made in 1982 that, as far as I know, has never been shown in the United States, and you can find it on YouTube. It was done by the Canadian Broadcasting System, CBC, where they interviewed some of these people. Marlon Perkins from the Wild Kingdom was a little bit offended and pissed off, but even Walt Disney's nephew sort of half admitted a lot of these stuff. But it's crazy. And the Canadian documentary was basically on animal cruelty in film. It's called Cruel Camera. I'll put a link to it in the description below, because it is out there on YouTube. But it's very interesting that, some of the things they just routinely did is crazy, but it just shows that, even back in the 50s and the 60s, people were doing totally crazy fake stuff and passing it off as Warlock. I resemble that remark. Throat's a little dry. But they're passing it off as being real and being educational, and they're trying to reinforce that that Victorian early. I don't want to call it Darwinian evolutionary theory, because he wasn't really like that, but some of the people first bought into the theory of evolution were all about survival of the fittest, and kind of portrayed nature as this constant fight and conflict between everything. So they staged all these scenes where, wolves and bears and mountain lions are always getting into conflicts with each other and fighting over deer kills, and, conflicts between snakes and alligators and other predators, and a lot of these things were staged with animals that were raised in captivity or borrowed from zoos or whatever, and it's fake. Most of, and in a way it's kind of weird, because some of the stuff that I watched as a kid that kind of led me towards, liking wildlife and environmentalism, it's like finding out that Santa Claus doesn't exist all over again, just, the things that you've been taught were correct were fake. They were done for entertainment. They were done for making a buck on selling a film or a TV show. And like I said, it goes all the way back into the 50s, if not earlier, with this, and just perpetuating myths and urban legends like lemmings following each other off cliffs during some sort of annual migration. Not a real thing. And then, you get towards today where it's sort of a supercharged version of that. And, I don't have cable. I haven't had cable in, I don't know, 6-7 years, something like that. It's been a while. Comcast pissed me off. But, when we got to the point where the History Channel just kept on getting more and more over the top with ancient aliens and all kinds of weird conspiracy theories about these ancient civilizations, and I find that stuff interesting, and sometimes I find some of these weird things entertaining, and I think, it's good to have an open mind to other alternative theories. After all, we wouldn't be as far along with physics if we shut off Einstein for having something that was different than the gravitational laws of Isaac Newton. So you've got to be open to new theories and new ideas, but at the same time, you got to shut off the bullshit factory. And especially, it's bad when you've got supposedly educational content that's just generated as clickbait. You got things that are notorious on YouTube, these little, life hacks that don't work. 10 life hacks how to do this, and 10 life hacks how to do that. And and Animal Planet went chugging around the bend about, well, it's owned by the same company that owns the History Channel, or at least it was at one time, and, they made a sort of fake documentary about mermaids as if they were a real, like, primate species. And it was bad enough that, that they had a very small disclaimer at the beginning. It was kind of like War of the Worlds. If you missed that first 10 seconds, you're just sitting there scratching your head like, my God, is this real? What the hell? Because none of it made sense. It's like, this obviously doesn't seem right, but they're portraying it like it's real, like it's a documentary, like they're interviewing real people with real government positions talking about, mermaids being harmed by Navy sonar, and the Navy itself made them put a better disclaimer on the damn thing because they were tired of being flooded with phone calls about the sonar killing mermaids in Virginia Beach. It's just nuts how far we've gone. But you really do have to learn enough science and learn enough critical thinking and be able to not be fooled by this stuff. But it's really hard when people are, putting their kids in front of a TV and letting them watch something that they believe is factual educational programming from a reputable source, and it's just made up bullshit. And that's part of the reason why the world's all fucked up. Because, the people trying to make decisions about how to set policies or how to deal with things just aren't dealing with facts. It's a sad state of affairs. I mean, there should be, some sort of regulation on it, I guess. Some sort, you don't want to infringe on somebody's artistic license or free speech, but at the same time, you got to be able to distinguish what is a fact and what is a fallacy, and what is an urban legend, and what's made on a soundstage somewhere. I mean, it was kind of weird watching a documentary and seeing Walt Disney's nephew, Roy, admit that that 10 years before this thing was made in 1982, which would be 1972, he would not have been as open about the scenes being faked because they still had a disclaimer at the front of these movies stating that all this stuff was things that they had filmed as they naturally unfolded in the wild. So think about that. I mean, and you wonder, kids are put in front of a TV by their parents to watch something educational, and they end up being made dumber by the people who are supposed to be teaching them. And that's one of the problems we have. That's one of the ways we end up in places like we are now. And that's part of the reason why, even in the larger scheme of things with our education system, things are broke because people believe different things to be factual, because people are taught a lot of false facts, no matter who's taught where. Depending on what region of the country you grow up in, you are taught a different version of American history. Depending on whether you're raised in the North or in the South, or in the city or in a rural area, you've got totally different narratives about what was or wasn't important, who was or wasn't important, and, different slants on issues. Even the Civil War. The Civil War is taught differently in South Carolina than it is in Pennsylvania. And, I wish I would have bought one of the used books when I was down there. Because, I've actually seen books that, they were like written in the 1960s and probably would have been used in classrooms on into at least the late 70s, early 80s, that refer to the Civil War as the War of Northern Aggression. So just think what, you've got a generation of people who were grown up with a certain worldview based on a distorted set of facts, arguing with another group that it probably also has another distorted view of facts. And part of it is just simplifying it, because, you could teach an entire, 12 years of school on nothing but the Civil War alone. It's very complicated. There's a lot of different things going on in a lot of different regions. There were Indian tribes involved, all kinds of things. That there were foreign powers involved, and trade with France and trade with England, and you had the I'm drawing a blank on their name, but the guys mostly from the Confederacy who were wanting to expand the United States into places like Cuba, Mexico, and Central America to create more slave states. So that tied in with our relations on up to the present with a lot of these countries like Panama. So, it's a very complex thing. That said, we often have very spun interpretations of things, and it's really sad when the things that are supposed to be factual are, distorting things. They're doing it for entertainment, they're doing it for a political agenda, whatever. But, just remember, when you're watching a Disney movie, it is propaganda, whether you like it or not. And, your kid wants to grow up to be a Disney princess or whatever. Remember, Pocahontas was not a Disney princess. She had a rather hard life, and the English killed her first husband that I don't believe was even mentioned in the cartoon. So, there's a lot of weird stuff. By modern standards, we'd think of her as basically being abducted. Rasputin, for all of his supposed craziness, he's very legendary. He was a Ukrainian monk from Siberia. He was a real person. Tsar Nicholas was a real person. The Romanovs were shot and killed. That is real history. Your kids being made dumber watching Disney films, and even the ones that aren't cartoons, and a lot of them going back for decades and decades and decades. Ones that aren't as over the top as Animal Planet with the mermaids, or even as much as I like them, Steve Irwin, a little overly sensational, and while I think he was on the edge but maybe not across it, he spawned a lot of copycats that seem to have been over that edge. all this speculation about megalodon and, you know, chasing Bigfoot, even though I'm one of the few people that, from a scientific perspective, has an open mind to Bigfoot having, at least at one time, been a real creature that existed. 99% of the stuff that's come out since the 1970s is just hoaxes and bullshit that's made for entertainment purposes alone, that has no basis in anything. You know, it's UFOs. UFOs are literally unidentified flying objects. I believe there are real people who honestly see things that aren't identified. Do I believe that there's aliens and all that other shit? If there were aliens, why the hell would they come here? You know, is one, I forget who the hell it was. There was some guy that, you know, he figured out that, you know, there's all these different classifications of civilizations, and somebody advanced enough to be able to travel to Earth would be as interested in us as we are in ants. So, you know, there's just so much flooding us as being legitimate educational sources that aren't. And, you know, even if you look at the chaos now and think, well, this is obvious, it's not like it was in the good old days. White Wilderness, 1958. Totally fake. Shot on sound stages. Making bear cubs go rolling down mountains. Pushing lemmings into the Bow River in Calgary. All fake. All a lie. Nowadays, they'd probably try to create some sort of an angle to sell merchandise off of it. That's about all that changed. So, be careful, check your sources, and don't believe everything you've seen on TV when you were growing up, because even if it was supposedly educational programming, there's a good chance it was just bullshit. And I'll put a link to that CBC documentary in the description below. You can watch it yourself, and if you're as old as me and old enough to remember Marlin Perkins or, you know, The Wonderful World of Disney or any of that stuff, you know, drink a beer, wash away the pain. See you on the next one. Well, I hope you found that video informative. Hopefully it made you think, and please click the like button and subscribe if you haven't done that already, and check out the video that should be appearing somewhere around me here, and I hope to see you on the next one. Thanks.